night is quiet enough now that even old mistakes feel comfortable. This is usually when history behaves best. It stops performing and starts breathing. The kind of hour when a city can admit how strange its beginnings really were. Venice prefers this hour. Not the one filled with crowds and cameras and polished reflections. The other one. The hour when water barely moves and wood remembers weight. This is not a story about ambition. It is a story about settling for survival and discovering that survival sometimes grows ideas while no one is watching. Long before Venice was a destination, it was an inconvenience. The lagoon was not land in any reassuring sense of the word. It was shallow water pretending to be solid and mud pretending to hold its shape. Salt crept into everything. Mosquitoes treated the air as a shared resource. The smell arrived before you did and stayed long after you left. This was not a place people moved to. This was a place people ended up when all other options failed quietly and without apology. The people who arrived were not dreamers. They were tired. They did not come with plans or maps or inspiring speeches. They came with children who needed carrying and bundles that contained whatever had survived the road. The lagoon did not welcome them. It tolerated them in the way water tolerates wood. You sink a little, you adjust, you learn where not to stand. The ground shifts just enough to remind you that it does not belong to you. Nothing about the lagoon suggested permanence. There were no fields to plant, no hills to defend, no clear borders to draw, just water changing its mind twice a day. The refugees learned quickly that the old rules did not apply here. You could not build the way you used to. Stone disappeared. Foundations dissolved. Wood became the only honest material because it admitted its weakness up front. Stakes driven into mud did not promise stability. They promised effort. Constant effort. Food did not come from soil. It came from patience. Fish traps woven from reeds. Salt coaxed from shallow pools and left to dry under indifferent skies. Some days there was enough, some days there was not. The lagoon did not reward hard work. It merely acknowledged persistence. This was not prosperity. It was continuity. A quieter goal that felt extravagant after everything else had burned. The irony arrived slowly. The lagoon that could not be conquered became a place that could not easily be ruled. Horses sank. Armies hesitated. Siege engines looked embarrassed. The very qualities that made the lagoon undesirable made it inconvenient for anyone hoping to impose order from the outside. Power did not arrive wearing armor. It arrived as conversation. Agreement mattered more than command. Leaving was always an option. That alone changed the tone of authority. Living on water altered how people thought. Roads disappeared, boats replaced footsteps. Distance became a question of tide rather than miles. Movement required attention. You learned to read water the way others read land. Subtle changes in color meant depth. A shift in smell meant weather. The lagoon trained its inhabitants to notice quietly. It discouraged impatience. There was nowhere to rush to anyway. Children grew up without knowing anything else. For them, the lagoon was not a refuge. It was home. They balanced on boats before they walked steadily. They learned which islands flooded and which endured. They treated water as a surface rather than an obstacle. Identity changed without ceremony. A population that arrived as refugees became something else simply by staying long enough for memory to adjust. What emerged was not a city in the traditional sense. It was a collection of compromises held together by habit. Houses raised slightly higher each year, walkways adjusted, platforms reinforced. Nothing finished, nothing final. Venice did not rise, it accumulated. Each generation added just enough to keep the previous one from sinking. Ambition would come later. For now, the goal was to remain above water, both literally and otherwise. There is a gentle humor in the idea that one of history's most improbable cities began as a logistical inconvenience. No dramatic founding, no heroic conquest, just people choosing the least dangerous option available and discovering that it came with unusual side effects. Safety bred cooperation. Cooperation bred systems. Systems bred confidence. All without anyone announcing a vision. The lagoon shaped behavior in ways land never could. Ownership felt temporary. You could not fence water. You could not hoard pathways that shifted daily. Wealth became mobile. Boats could leave. Salt pans could be abandoned and rebuilt. Control required persuasion rather than force. This did not make the people kind. It made them practical. Sentiment wastes energy. The lagoon demanded efficiency. Venice learned early that appearance mattered less than function. Beauty would arrive eventually. For now, there was work to do. Wood had to be replaced before it rotted. Platforms had to be lifted before the next flood. Fish had to be caught before the weather changed its mind. The lagoon rewarded attention more than strength. That lesson stayed. Over time, the accident hardened into habit into identity. The city did not escape its origins, it refined them. What began as an unwanted refuge became a place comfortable with instability. A city built on water had no illusions about permanence. Everything was provisional. That awareness created a strange confidence. When nothing is guaranteed, you stop waiting for guarantees. In the quiet hours, Venice still feels like this. The water remains unconvinced. The ground remembers movement. The city rests not on certainty, but on repetition. Stakes driven into mud, holding stories instead of monuments. It is unsettling in the way all honest things are. A reminder that some of the longest-lasting structures in history began as mistakes no one bothered to correct. The lagoon never promised greatness. It offered time to adapt, time to adjust expectations downward until survival felt like success. From there, everything else followed without asking permission. Venice did not conquer nature. It negotiated with it and accepted the terms. That negotiation never ended. It simply became quieter. This is why the city endures in memory as something slightly unreal. A place that should not exist, yet continues anyway. Not because it was destined, not because it was chosen, but because a group of people stayed where others would not and learned to listen to water long enough for it to carry them forward. At some point, the lagoon stopped feeling temporary, not because it became friendly or generous, but because the people living on it ran out of alternatives. The first nights were about staying awake, listening, learning which sounds meant danger and which meant nothing at all. Water moves differently at night. It hides its intentions. The refugees noticed this early and quietly accepted that sleep would have to adjust. The old habits failed quickly. You could not plant seeds and expect them to forgive salt. You could not tie animals to ground that softened under their weight. Attempts were made. They did not last long. The lagoon responded without drama. Crops yellowed, hooves sank, effort dissolved into mud. This was not cruelty. It was physics expressing an opinion. So the people watched instead. They learned when the water crept higher and when it pulled back like it had changed its mind. They noticed how wind altered the surface and how the smell shifted before storms arrived. The lagoon spoke constantly. It just refused to raise its voice. Survival meant paying attention to things that looked boring to everyone else. Fishing became less about skill and more about timing. Traps were placed where fish expected calm and found confusion. Reeds bent easily, which made them perfect. Wood rotted, but not immediately. Everything lasted just long enough if you checked it often. This became the rhythm, dawn and dusk. Tide in, tide out. Patience replaced ambition. That adjustment alone probably saved lives. Salt arrived quietly, not as a discovery but as a side effect. Shallow pools left alone did what shallow pools always do. Water disappeared, crystals remained. The process was slow and unforgiving. A single storm could undo weeks of work. The lagoon demanded consistency without promising reward. People learned to accept this without complaint. Complaints waste energy. Energy mattered. Food was not guaranteed. Some days the traps were generous. Some days they were philosophical about absence. The lagoon taught restraint by example. You ate what arrived, you planned less, you adapted more. Over time, this changed how people thought about ownership. Nothing was truly yours if water could take it back overnight. Children learned differently. They did not remember land as something reliable. To them, water was not an obstacle. It was a surface that required respect. They balanced instinctively. They learned routes that shifted and remembered markers that moved. Their sense of direction was fluid. The lagoon shaped them before language did. Boats became feet. Distance became negotiable. A place that seemed close in clear weather felt unreachable when wind changed its mood. This discouraged unnecessary travel. It also discouraged unnecessary authority. If people could leave easily, then power had to persuade rather than demand. The lagoon did not support rigid structures. It preferred arrangements. Houses followed the same logic. They were raised when flooding became annoying rather than catastrophic. Platforms thickened gradually. Repairs never stopped. The idea of a finished building felt unrealistic. Completion suggested permanence, and permanence felt arrogant. Everything remained provisional. That made failure easier to accept. There is a faint humor in the way the lagoon trained its inhabitants. It stripped away confidence early and replaced it with competence. No speeches, no grand gestures, just repetition. The lagoon did not reward strength. It tolerated attentiveness. Those who learned lasted. Those who insisted disappeared quietly. Over time, this way of living created something unusual, a community comfortable with uncertainty, a population trained to adjust rather than resist. Stability came from flexibility, not control. This mindset would later look like wisdom. At the time, it felt like exhaustion, wearing good manners. The lagoon never offered abundance. It offered continuity, staying alive long enough for patterns to emerge. Once patterns emerged, people began to trust them. Trust turned into routine. Routine turned into culture, all without anyone announcing a beginning. Late at night, the lagoon still teaches this lesson. Water laps against wood with familiar indifference. The city rests on habits learned slowly under pressure. There is no pride in this, just endurance. A reminder that some civilizations are built not on triumph, but on the quiet decision to keep going when nothing else seems reasonable. By the time survival stopped feeling miraculous, the lagoon had already taught its next lesson. It arrived without ceremony and without enthusiasm. Salt did not announce itself as opportunity. It simply remained after everything else had left. Water evaporated. Crystals stayed behind. The people noticed, not because they were visionary, but because hunger sharpens attention in very practical ways. Salt changed the rhythm of life without changing its mood. Fishing was uncertain. Weather had opinions. Salt at least behaved predictably if treated with patience. Shallow pools filled and emptied. Sun and wind did their quiet work. What remained was white and sharp and valuable in ways the lagoon itself did not care about. The process was slow. It required weeks of watching water disappear millimeter by millimeter. One careless storm could erase an entire season. The lagoon enjoyed reminding people of that. This was not wealth in any dramatic sense. No one was getting rich. But something more important happened. Trade became possible. Salt could be exchanged for things the lagoon refused to provide. Grain, tools, cloth. Not abundance, just continuity. Enough to keep going without constantly negotiating with hunger. In a place built on uncertainty, stability felt extravagant. The people adjusted their expectations accordingly. Riches were not discussed. Prosperity sounded unrealistic. What mattered was predictability. Knowing that next week would look roughly like this week. Knowing that effort would probably lead to something edible. The lagoon did not reward ambition. It acknowledged consistency. That became enough. Salt also changed how people interacted with those beyond the water. Traders arrived carefully. Boats that did not belong learned the channels slowly. Outsiders underestimated the place at first. Mud and insects do that. But they did not underestimate salt for long. In a world where food spoiled quickly, salt was quiet power. Armies marched because of it. Voyages lasted because of it. Venice did not need to explain itself. The goods did that. Something subtle shifted in identity. The people stopped thinking of themselves as temporary guests. Salt pans do not belong to those passing through. They belong to those willing to wait. Waiting became a skill. Patience became reputation. The lagoon residents were no longer refugees waiting to leave. They were specialists in staying. This did not make them sentimental. The lagoon discouraged that. It made them practical to the point of dryness. Deals were clear, expectations modest. There was no reason to pretend the environment cared. It did not. It simply responded to attention or ignored neglect. That honesty shaped character quietly. Stability replaced aspiration as the primary goal, not because aspiration was wrong, but because it was unnecessary. When survival no longer consumed every thought, there was room for planning. Planning without fantasy. Planning that assumed floods would return and storms would interfere. Plans built with margins. Plans that accepted interruption as normal. Salt also required cooperation. No single family could manage everything alone. Pools needed maintenance, channels needed clearing. Timing mattered. Shared effort emerged, not as idealism but as efficiency. The lagoon did not tolerate isolation well. You could try. You would fail faster. Cooperation became habit rather than principle. There is mild humor in how this economy developed. An empire would eventually grow from crystals scraped patiently from shallow water. No grand design, no prophecy, just repetition performed long enough to become structure. Stability layered upon itself until it resembled intention. The outside world continued to change. Invasions came and went. Cities rose and fell. The lagoon remained inconvenient. That inconvenience became its defense. Those who valued speed and spectacle looked elsewhere. Those who valued reliability learned the channels. Children born into this world understood something their parents did not at first. Leaving was no longer assumed. Home was not a memory. It was water and wood and work. the lagoon stopped being refuge and became reference point. Identity followed environment without discussion. Late at night, this transition feels visible. The salt pools lie quiet. The water reflects nothing in particular. The city rests not in triumph but in repetition. Stability hums softly beneath the surface. Not exciting, not impressive, just sufficient. And in that sufficiency, something rare formed. A community that did not measure success by expansion or dominance, but by continuity, by the ability to wake up tomorrow and do this again. Salt did not promise greatness. It offered time. Time proved to be enough. Power usually likes firm surfaces, stone walls, straight roads, clear borders that can be pointed to on a map and defended with confidence. The lagoon offered none of that. It presented water that shifted, islands that multiplied, and channels that forgot their shape whenever the tide felt like rewriting the rules. This alone made authority uncomfortable, not impossible, just exhausting. And exhaustion has a way of discouraging ambition. No one arrived in the lagoon intending to build a political experiment. They arrived intending not to die. Everything else followed from that modest goal. The geography did most of the work. You could not march an army across water that refused to behave like land. You could not surround a settlement that could simply move sideways. You could not impose control on people who could load their lives onto boats and vanish into channels you did not know existed yesterday. This did something unusual to the idea of power. On land, power announces itself. In the lagoon, power had to negotiate. If someone pushed too hard, the response was not rebellion. It was absence. Boats left. Labor disappeared. Salt pans sat unattended. Fishing routes shifted. Authority learned quickly that force produced inconvenience rather than obedience. That lesson tends to linger. The islands did not form a neat hierarchy. There was no obvious center at first. Each cluster developed its own habits and rivalries. Some specialized in fishing. Others leaned toward trade. Some argued constantly over channels and access. None of them had the strength to dominate the rest. That balance was not idealistic. It was logistical. Any attempt to seize everything required boats and manpower that no single group could spare without weakening itself elsewhere. Distance in the lagoon was deceptive. Two islands might look close and remain unreachable for hours depending on wind and tide. Control that depends on speed struggled here. Messages arrived late, decisions aged quickly. The environment encouraged delay. Delay softened authority. Orders lost urgency when they arrived after circumstances had already changed. People adapted their expectations accordingly. They stopped waiting for someone to take charge in a dramatic way. Leadership became practical rather than symbolic. Who could settle disputes before they interrupted work? Who could coordinate defenses without insisting on loyalty that could not be enforced? Authority grew sideways instead of upward. This arrangement lacked romance. It did not inspire speeches or monuments. It inspired routines, meetings that went on too long, compromises that satisfied no one completely, the kind of governance that looks unimpressive from a distance but functions just well enough to avoid collapse. The lagoon rewarded this dullness. Stability survived where charisma would have drowned. There is something faintly amusing about how difficult conquest became here. An invader arriving with confidence found the confidence misplaced almost immediately. Horses panicked, equipment sank, supply lines stretched into confusion. Locals watched politely while outsiders argued with water. The lagoon did not defend itself aggressively. It simply refused cooperation. Internally, this produced a strange equality, not social equality, that would come later and incompletely, but practical equality. Everyone relied on everyone else more than they relied on rulers. Fishing routes overlapped. Salt pans required coordination. Channels needed maintenance. No island functioned alone for long. Authority emerged as coordination rather than command. Leaving remained possible. That mattered. When departure is easy, loyalty changes tone. People stay because it works, not because they are forced. This discouraged tyranny more effectively than any written rule. A leader who forgot this found themselves governing fewer people than expected. Over time, habits hardened into systems. Councils formed because talking was cheaper than fighting. Agreements replaced decrees. Power learned to circulate rather than settle. The lagoon did not support permanence, neither did its people. Positions rotated. Responsibilities shifted. Memory became institutional rather than personal. This slow diffusion of authority made the community resilient. Remove one figure, and life continued. Disrupt one island, and others compensated. There was no single throat to cut, no capital to seize that would collapse everything at once. Outsiders struggled to understand this. They searched for a center that did not exist yet. Late at night, this structure feels appropriate. The water moves quietly between islands. Lights reflect without aligning. Nothing insists on being dominant. The city does not posture, it endures. Power here learned humility early, not out of virtue, but out of necessity. Eventually, this would look like wisdom. At the time, it felt like inconvenience stretched over generations. Decisions took longer. Consensus required patience, but patience was already abundant. The lagoon had taught that lesson from the beginning. This community did not refuse to be ruled out of rebellion. It refused because rule as traditionally understood did not fit the terrain. Authority adapted or it failed. Those who adapted stayed. Those who did not moved on or sank into irrelevance. In the end, the lagoon shaped governance the same way it shaped buildings, slowly, unevenly, with constant adjustment. Power rested on wood, driven into uncertainty. Not impressive, just effective enough to last. After power learned how to soften itself, the next adjustment felt almost natural. The lagoon did not ask who was strongest. It asked who could manage complexity without making it worse. As communities grew and tasks multiplied, the need for coordination became obvious. Not command, coordination. Someone had to know when channels needed clearing. Someone had to calm disputes before they disrupted work. Someone had to speak for the group when outsiders arrived, pretending not to be confused. The idea of choosing such a person did not arrive with ceremony. It arrived the way most practical ideas do. Gradually, a meeting that lasted too long, an argument that wasted an afternoon, a boat that left without knowing where to dock. The lagoon has little patience for inefficiency. When mistakes repeat often enough, they begin to suggest solutions. What emerged was not a ruler in the traditional sense. There was no crown, no permanent seat, no illusion that authority flowed downward from a higher place. The coordinator was chosen because someone had to be, not because anyone wanted the role for very long. The position existed to serve the work, not the other way around. This choice changed the tone of power immediately. A coordinator did not own authority, they borrowed it. Everyone understood this. The lagoon made borrowing a familiar concept. Boats were borrowed, tools were borrowed, labor moved where it was needed. Authority joined the list of things that passed through hands temporarily. The coordinator could not command loyalty through fear. Fear requires walls. Walls require land that behaves. The lagoon provided neither. What the coordinator had instead was expectation. The expectation that they would keep things moving, that they would not stall, progress with personal ambition, that they would step aside when usefulness expired. This made leadership strangely exhausting and strangely safe. Exhausting because it required constant listening. Safe because failure rarely ended in violence. If someone coordinated poorly, people did not revolt. They simply stopped cooperating. Boats went elsewhere. Meetings lost attendance. Authority faded quietly. The lagoon had perfected the art of passive correction. Selection mattered more than ceremony. The community looked for people who understood timing, who knew when to wait and when to act, who could speak without inflaming, who remembered that everyone else could leave. These were not heroic traits. They were domestic ones. The ability to manage irritation, the willingness to compromise without announcing sacrifice. Power became conditional by default. It lasted only as long as it worked. The lagoon encouraged this humility. Any attempt to turn coordination into dominance looked ridiculous against water that refused to stay still. Pretension drowned faster than boats. There is mild irony here. A system that later observers might describe as advanced emerged from inconvenience rather than philosophy. No one was trying to invent governance. They were trying to keep things from falling apart before the next tide. Theory arrived later. Practice came first. Meetings replaced marches. Agreements replaced sieges. Decisions were discussed until they were dull enough to accept. The lagoon rewarded dullness. It did not reward spectacle. Loud authority looked unstable. Quiet competence endured. The temporary nature of power also changed how conflicts ended. There was little incentive to escalate. Winning an argument too forcefully made cooperation harder later. Everyone knew they would need each other again. Salt pans do not run on grudges. Channels do not respect resentment. This arrangement did not eliminate ambition. It redirected it. Instead of conquering territory, people competed in usefulness. Who could solve problems fastest? Who could keep trade flowing? Who could prevent disruption without making a scene? Reputation became currency, not wealth. Reliability. Late at night, this structure feels visible. The water slips between islands without hierarchy. Lights reflect unevenly. No single source dominates. The city breathes through coordination rather than control. Power moves like tide, present and absent in predictable rhythms. The system was imperfect. It favored those with time and connections. It excluded many voices. But within its limits, it worked. It avoided stagnation. It avoided tyranny. It kept the community flexible enough to respond to change without tearing itself apart. Most importantly, it normalized the idea that leadership was not permanent, that authority could be assigned and withdrawn without drama, that stepping down was not failure, it was completion. The lagoon appreciated completion. It allowed space for the next adjustment. By choosing coordinators instead of conquerors, the community aligned governance with environment. Power became something that floated rather than something that pressed downward. It rested lightly on the surface, heavy enough to function, light enough to move. This was not idealism, it was adaptation. The lagoon does not care about ideals, it cares about balance. The people learned to care about it too. By the time coordination became habit, the lagoon had already prepared its next transformation. It did not arrive with banners or declarations. It arrived with boats, slow ones, heavy ones, boats that cared less about meaning and more about margins. Venice did not wake up one morning deciding to value trade above ideals. It simply noticed that trade kept working when other explanations failed. The lagoon had no interest in purity. It had room only for movement. Goods arrived because water made movement easier than roads ever could. Boats slipped through channels, carrying things that other places wanted but could not easily reach. Wood, salt, fish, later grain and metal and cloth. The city did not produce much that impressed outsiders. What it did produce was access. This was the quiet revelation. You did not need to own everything if you controlled how things passed through. The lagoon sat between worlds that barely understood each other. Land powers looked inland, sea powers looked outward, Venice looked sideways. Goods came in tired and left lighter. Money behaved differently. It preferred to stay. Trade asked for very little loyalty. It did not care who ruled as long as docks worked and channels stayed open. This suited the lagoon perfectly. Ideals complicate exchange. Convictions slow negotiations. Trade prefers predictability. Venice learned this early and never unlearned it. Merchants replaced heroes, not because merchants were admirable, but because they were useful. They noticed demand before it announced itself. They understood that distance increased value. That time could be priced. That risk could be shared. The lagoon trained them well. Every voyage was uncertain. Every return was conditional. Caution became professionalism. Goods moved. People talked. Money accumulated quietly. No speeches required, no justification necessary. If something sold well, it stayed. If it did not, it disappeared. This ruthless simplicity gave the city an edge that looked like intelligence from the outside. Inside, it felt like exhaustion refined into routine. There is a faint humor in how unromantic this empire began. No grand cause, no civilizing mission, just the observation that moving things between people who did not like each other could be very profitable. Venice did not ask why two regions disagreed. It asked what each was willing to pay to avoid dealing directly. The lagoon encouraged this detachment. Water creates distance even when it connects. Deals felt less personal when conducted from boats. Offense drifted away with the tide. Resentment dissolved into logistics. Commerce replaced conviction. Not because Venice rejected meaning, but because meaning interfered with schedules. This did not make the city neutral, it made it selective. Conflicts were weighed for impact on trade, alliances were temporary, loyalty followed advantage. Outsiders called this cold. The lagoon called it survival. Stability required income. Income required movement. Everything else was negotiable. Money staying while goods moved created a specific kind of confidence. Wealth did not flash, it accumulated, slowly, measured, reinvested. Infrastructure improved, docks expanded, ships multiplied. The city grew accustomed to growth without spectacle. This comfort with gradual advantage made sudden ambition seem unnecessary. Trade also demanded information. Prices changed, routes shifted, supply fluctuated. Venice became attentive, messengers mattered, reports mattered, knowledge became currency. The lagoon rewarded those who listened more than those who declared. Information moved faster than armies, and lasted longer. The merchants were not sentimental about their role. They knew trade was fickle. Routes could close. Partners could fail. That awareness kept them adaptable. They diversified. They hedged. They never trusted a single path for too long. The Lagoon approved. Late at night, the docks reveal this history more clearly than monuments ever could. Ropes creak, water laps, boats wait. Nothing dramatic, just readiness. Commerce does not need applause. It needs continuity. Choosing trade over ideals was not a moral decision. It was an environmental one. The Lagoon rewarded flow, not firmness. Those who resisted learned slowly. Those who adapted thrived quietly. Goods kept moving. Money kept staying. This arrangement shaped the city more deeply than any law. It taught Venice to think in terms of exchange rather than possession, influence rather than dominance, access rather than control. These habits would define its future long after the Lagoon stopped feeling temporary. The irony is gentle but persistent. A place born from flight became powerful by refusing to stand still, not because it chased greatness, but because it stayed useful. Trade did not give Venice meaning. It gave it time. Time to grow into something that looked intentional only in hindsight. The Lagoon never cared why boats arrived. It cared that they floated. Venice learned to care the same way. Once commerce settled into the bones of the Lagoon, a quieter transformation followed. It did not announce itself with policy or debate. It revealed itself through behavior. Decisions began to sound less emotional. Conversations shortened. Outcomes mattered more than impressions. Reputation still existed, but it no longer led. It followed. Venice learned early that being admired was expensive. Admiration required gestures. Gestures invited scrutiny. Scrutiny slowed movement. The Lagoon had no patience for delay. Boats did not wait for applause. Tides did not respect dignity. Profit, on the other hand, was measurable. It arrived quietly and stayed when treated properly. This made it easier to trust. Merchants developed a language stripped of romance. Words like honor and pride faded into the background. They were not rejected. They were simply inefficient. A deal that worked was a good deal even if it offended someone somewhere. Offense passed, profit lingered. The Lagoon preferred lingering things. This logic felt cold to outsiders. Inside it felt calming. You did not have to pretend to be virtuous. You only had to be precise. Numbers did not argue. Accounts did not flatter. They simply reported. Venice came to rely on that honesty. It was less exhausting than maintaining appearances. Reputation still mattered, but in a different way. It became practical rather than moral. A merchant known for reliability attracted partners. One known for theatrics attracted suspicion. Trust shifted from character to consistency. People were believed because they delivered, not because they claimed virtue. This was not cynicism. It was efficiency. The city absorbed this mindset fully. Decisions were weighed for consequence rather than symbolism. Offending a rival mattered less than interrupting trade. Losing face was acceptable. Losing access was not. Venice did not seek love. It sought leverage. Love is unpredictable. Leverage is measurable. There is a soft irony here. A city surrounded by water learned to value dryness of thought. Emotions were treated like weather, not ignored, but accounted for. If anger arrived, you waited it out. If pride swelled, you adjusted course. The goal was always continuity. This approach changed how Venice interacted with others. Allies were useful until they were not. Agreements lasted as long as they worked. When circumstances changed, so did loyalties. Outsiders called this betrayal. Venice called it revision. The lagoon revised itself twice a day. Why should politics be different? Merchants learned to separate insult from injury. Insult bruised ego. Injury interrupted cash flow. Only one required response. This distinction saved energy. It also created a reputation that Venice would carry for centuries. Dependable, calculating, unsentimental, strangely stable. Late at night, the logic feels almost comforting. The city hums with quiet calculation. Windows glow. Accounts are balanced. No speeches are given. No banners raised. Profit does not need ceremony. It needs accuracy. This did not mean Venice lacked pride. It meant pride was internal. It expressed itself through resilience rather than display, through systems that worked while others argued about meaning, through infrastructure that outlasted insults. The city learned to take satisfaction in endurance. Merchants laughed softly at grandstanding. Loud virtue often concealed weak planning. Venice preferred silence that delivered results. This preference shaped its culture deeply. Art would flourish later. Architecture would impress. But underneath it all, the arithmetic remained unchanged. The coldness of merchant logic was not cruelty, it was restraint, a refusal to be distracted by narrative. The lagoon had taught that lesson early. Stories float, numbers sink into memory. When storms arrived, it was numbers that mattered. By placing profit above reputation, Venice reduced the number of things it needed to defend. Reputation invites challenge. Profit invites imitation. Imitation is easier to manage. Competitors can be outperformed. Enemies seeking moral victory are harder to satisfy. This strategy did not make Venice invincible. It made it durable. Durability was the real ambition, even if no one said it aloud. To last, to continue, to remain useful longer than expected. The merchants never claimed this logic was noble. They claimed it worked. That was enough. In a world where certainty was rare, functionality became its own virtue. Venice accepted that without embarrassment. As night deepens, the lagoon reflects this calm indifference. Water does not care how it is perceived. It responds to gravity and wind. Venice learned to do the same. Reputation drifted. Profit settled. The city rested on the quiet confidence of arithmetic that rarely needed defending. This was the calm at the heart of the merchant republic. Not warmth, not righteousness, just clarity. And clarity travels well across water. The lagoon had already learned how to trade without romance. The next lesson arrived wrapped in noise, wood cracking, iron ringing, water slapping against hulls that were not finished yet but already impatient. This was not industry, as later centuries would understand it. There were no smokestacks, no banners celebrating progress, just repetition, sharpened into efficiency, and a refusal to stop once momentum had been discovered. The arsenal did not begin as an idea. It began as a problem. Demand outpaced patience. Ships were needed faster than tradition allowed. Building one vessel at a time in scattered workshops felt inefficient in a city that had grown accustomed to flow. So the work was gathered, centralized, watched carefully. The lagoon approved of this concentration. It had always favored systems over sentiment. Inside the arsenal, the rhythm was relentless. Wood arrived rough and left shaped. Iron entered cold and exited obedient. Workers did not build ships. They built parts, frames, oars, ropes, sails. Each person repeated the same task until muscle memory replaced thought. This was not dehumanizing in the way later factories would be accused of. It was clarifying. You knew exactly what was expected. You delivered it. You went home tired but certain. Specialization changed everything. Skill deepened quickly when narrowed. A man who cut the same joint every day learned precision without theory. A woman weaving rope learned tension through feel rather than measurement. The arsenal produced competence faster than inspiration ever could. Pride followed quietly, not the loud kind, the kind that comes from knowing your work would float. The ships themselves moved through the complex like ideas moving through a mind. They entered incomplete and left whole. Water carried them from one station to the next. Each addition was expected. No improvisation, no commentary. This was process revealed. A system confident enough not to explain itself. Observers from outside struggled to describe what they were seeing. A ship emerging every day felt excessive, almost rude. Other cities built vessels with ceremony and delay. Venice built them with routine. The arsenal did not celebrate speed. It assumed it. That assumption changed the balance of power without announcing itself. Workers were treated with a strange mix of control and privilege. The state guarded the arsenal closely. Secrets mattered. Knowledge was contained. At the same time, the workers were fed, paid reliably, given wine, lots of wine. Productivity improves when morale is managed. The Lagoon had learned that lesson long before any handbook existed. There is gentle irony in how modern this place felt without knowing it. An assembly line before the word existed. Standardization without ideology, efficiency without sermons. The arsenal did not care about the future. It cared about tomorrow. That focus proved sufficient. The sound inside never truly stopped. Even at night, something shifted, something cooled, something waited. The arsenal breathed. Its presence was felt beyond its walls. Everyone knew that if the docks went quiet, trouble followed. Activity equaled safety. Noise meant readiness. This factory reshaped how Venice thought about labor. Work became collective rather than individual. Success depended on timing rather than brilliance. A slow worker disrupted everyone. A careful worker elevated the whole chain. Accountability became structural. You could not hide in a system that moved this smoothly. Late at night, the arsenal feels unsettling in the best way. Torches reflect off water. Hulls wait half-formed. Tools rest only briefly. There is no romance here, just persistence. The kind that makes empires possible without ever mentioning the word. The arsenal also changed how Venice fought. Losses could be replaced. Damage could be corrected. Time favored the city that could rebuild faster than it could be broken. This was not courage. It was logistics. Logistics win quietly while stories argue. Some found this disturbing. War reduced to scheduling. Violence turned into inventory. Venice did not deny this. It accepted it. The Lagoon had always reduced survival to management. The arsenal simply applied that lesson to scale. Generations passed through the same gates. Fathers taught sons, mothers taught daughters, skills stayed in families. Knowledge circulated but did not escape easily. This created loyalty not through fear but through familiarity. The arsenal was harsh. It was also dependable. In an unpredictable world, dependability feels generous. By gathering work into one place, Venice gathered time. Time saved in production became time gained in response. Rivals reacted. Venice prepared. The difference mattered. This was not innovation for its own sake. It was adaptation refined. The lagoon had always demanded adjustment. The arsenal was adjustment hardened into structure. When the city slept, the arsenal did not entirely rest. Something always waited to begin again. A keel unfinished, a rope half-coiled, a hull ready for its next layer. The machine did not dream. It endured. In this place, the future arrived early without fanfare. Not because Venice wanted it, but because efficiency had nowhere else to go. The arsenal did not promise greatness. It delivered readiness. That proved enough. After the arsenal learned how to move without stopping, something quieter settled in. Not speed, not noise, not even scale. What arrived was regularity, the kind that does not impress visitors but unnerves rivals. Ships continued to appear, day after day, not in bursts of urgency, but with the calm confidence of something that assumed tomorrow would arrive and intended to be ready for it. Repetition is rarely admired in history. It lacks drama. It does not produce heroes. It produces outcomes. Venice discovered this early and leaned into it without apology. The arsenal did not rush. It repeated. That repetition turned effort into expectation. Expectation into reliability. Reliability into power. Workers woke to the same sounds, the same bells, the same paths through water and wood, the same tasks waiting without surprise. This might sound dull. It was. That was the point. Dull work does not distract. It accumulates. Every repeated action removed uncertainty. When uncertainty disappears, planning becomes possible. The city learned that power built on repetition does not need reassurance. A rival can destroy a ship. Repetition replaces it. A storm can scatter a fleet. Repetition gathers another. Loss becomes temporary. Not tragic, not symbolic, just inconvenient. This changed how Venice thought about time. Other cities reacted. Venice prepared. Preparation does not require urgency. It requires consistency. The arsenal provided that consistency without asking permission. Ships emerged not because there was a crisis, but because the process said it was time. There is mild irony in how unexciting this strength looked. Visitors expected spectacle. They found routine. They expected innovation. They found procedure. And yet they returned home uneasy. Something about a city that could do the same thing every day without hesitation felt threatening. Repetition also altered morale. Workers did not need motivation speeches. The work itself set the rhythm. When you know exactly what tomorrow will ask of you, anxiety loses its grip. Fatigue remains. Doubt recedes. You stop wondering if effort matters. The ship floating at the end of the line answers that question. This regularity spread beyond the arsenal. The city adopted it as habit. Trade routes followed schedules. Accounts closed on time. Councils met because it was the hour to meet, not because emotions demanded it. The lagoon itself reinforced this mindset. Tides return. Winds shift predictably. Irregularity stands out. Regularity calms. Repetition created a strange confidence. Venice did not need to prove its strength constantly. It demonstrated it quietly. Rivals boasted. Venice delivered. Over time, this difference reshaped reputations. Loud power attracted attention. Quiet power accumulated advantage. The arsenal was not efficient by accident. It was efficient because nothing else distracted it. There were no debates inside about meaning, no arguments about purpose. The purpose was to continue. That clarity eliminated friction. Each worker contributed a fragment of a whole, that was already understood. Late at night, this clarity feels almost unsettling. Torches reflect off water. Hulls wait in silence. The absence of urgency feels deliberate, as if the city knows it has time. That knowledge is rare. Most places act as if time is always running out. Venice behaved as if tomorrow was already scheduled. Repetition also disciplined ambition. Individual brilliance mattered less than adherence to process. A worker who improvised disrupted the line. A worker who repeated flawlessly strengthened it. This reversed common values. Creativity stepped aside. Precision took its place. The result was not sterile. It was dependable. This dependability became strategic. When conflicts arose, Venice calculated differently. It knew how long replacement would take, how much loss could be absorbed, how long pressure could be endured. These calculations were not hopeful. They were practiced. Repetition had already tested them. There is a quiet humor in how terrifying this was to opponents. How do you intimidate a system that expects interruption? How do you exhaust a process that assumes repetition? Threats lose meaning when outcomes are already planned. The arsenal did not make Venice invincible. It made it patient. Patience outlasts force more often than history admits. Repetition taught patience through habit rather than philosophy. No one needed to believe in it. They lived it. Over generations, repetition hardened into tradition. Not ceremonial tradition, functional tradition. The way things are done because they work. Change occurred, but slowly, deliberately. New methods replaced old ones only after proving they could repeat just as reliably. This conservatism was misunderstood. Some called it stagnation, others called it rigidity. Venice experienced it as insurance. When storms came, and they always did, repetition held. The arsenal never asked what kind of world it was building. It asked what needed to be done next. That focus proved sufficient. Grand narratives were left to others. Venice preferred sequences. As night deepens, the city seems to rest on this principle. Water laps, tools wait. The next action is already known. Not exciting, not inspiring, just ready. This readiness was the real strength. Not the ships themselves, not the noise, not the scale. The certainty that tomorrow would look enough like today to be manageable. That certainty allowed Venice to expand influence without expanding anxiety. Repetition does not shout. It hums. Over time, that hum becomes difficult to ignore. Rivals listen too late. They mistake quiet for weakness. By the time they notice the pattern, it has already repeated. In this way, the arsenal taught the city its most durable lesson. Power does not always arrive through invention. Sometimes it arrives through refusal to stop, through showing up again, through doing the same thing well enough that disruption becomes temporary by default. The lagoon understood this long before the city did. Water repeats, tides repeat, erosion repeats. Venice learned to match that rhythm. The arsenal simply gave it structure. When the work finally paused, it did not feel like rest. It felt like delay. Everyone knew it would resume. That knowledge settled into the stones and the water alike. This was the strength of repetition. Calm, unspectacular, relentless. Enough. After repetition settled into strength, the city refined something even quieter. It built a way to govern without ever letting power feel comfortable. This was not dramatic. No speeches, no banners, just rooms, tables, lists, people watching other people closely enough to make ambition tired before it grew sharp edges. Venice did not trust individuals, not because individuals were evil, but because individuals were predictable. Predictable people accumulate influence. Influence attracts risk. The Lagoon had little patience for risk that could not be drained away. So power was broken into pieces small enough to manage and scattered across the city like ballast. Councils multiplied, not because debate was enjoyable, but because diffusion worked. Decisions passed through layers. One group proposed, another reviewed, a third delayed. Slowness was not a flaw, it was a filter. Urgent ideas usually needed cooling. Dangerous ones needed time to reveal themselves. The system provided both. No one body ruled alone. Every role had eyes on it. Oversight was constant and unromantic. Not suspicion exactly, more like expectation. Expectation that authority would be temporary. Expectation that every action would be noticed. Expectation that memory was institutional rather than personal. This created a strange atmosphere. Power existed everywhere and nowhere at once. You could not point to a single person and say, "This is the city." The city existed in procedure, in minutes recorded, in votes counted, in responsibilities divided so finely that no one could carry them all. Ambition learned to disguise itself or give up. Loud ambition attracted attention. Attention led to delay. Delay weakened momentum. The most successful figures learned restraint. They spoke carefully. They acted indirectly. They allowed others to share credit. Credit was dangerous anyway. The councils did not rush. Meetings lasted longer than anyone liked. Arguments repeated themselves. Nothing moved fast enough to feel decisive. That was intentional. Speed creates heroes. Venice did not want heroes. Heroes tend to outgrow systems. Systems survive heroes by outlasting them. This structure made betrayal difficult, not impossible, just inefficient. There was no single door to open, no single vault to empty. Information was distributed. Authority overlapped. If one part failed, another compensated. Collapse required cooperation. Cooperation required time. Time revealed intent. Late at night, these rooms felt heavy with silence. Candles burned low, papers stacked neatly. The city breathed through its bureaucracy. Not inspiring, not poetic, effective. The kind of effectiveness that makes outsiders impatient and insiders calm. There is mild irony in how little trust Venice placed in charisma. Charisma is expensive. It demands belief. Belief fluctuates. Venice preferred predictability. The councils trusted process more than personality. Process rarely asked for loyalty. It asked for compliance. The absence of a single dominant figure also changed how failure was treated. Mistakes were absorbed, blame diluted. No one fell far because no one stood alone. This frustrated those who wanted clear villains. Venice did not provide them. It provided continuity instead. Critics called this cowardice. Others called it stagnation. Venice experienced it as insurance. When crises arrived, and they always did, the system bent rather than broke. Decisions took longer. That bought time. Time mattered. The network of power extended beyond governance. Merchants watched officials, officials watched merchants, neighbors watched neighbors, not in paranoia but in habit. Everyone understood that stability depended on visibility. Secrecy was tolerated only in controlled spaces. Elsewhere, transparency kept ambition in check. This web also trained citizens to think institutionally, loyalty attached to the city rather than individuals. Offices mattered more than office holders. When someone left, another stepped in. The work continued. Memory resided in records, not reputations. There is something unsettling about a system that functions so well without affection. No one was adored, no one was indispensable, everyone was replaceable. This was not kindness, it was design. Replaceability reduced risk. The Lagoon approved. Late-night history prefers this kind of power, the kind that does not announce itself, the kind that works by being boring, councils meeting, votes counted, papers filed, decisions deferred until they lost their heat. Venice understood that silence can govern more effectively than command. Noise attracts opposition. Silence encourages adaptation. The city mastered this early and refined it patiently. The quiet network did not promise justice. It promised survival. It promised that no single mistake would end everything, that no single person could steer the city into disaster alone. That reassurance was enough. In this way, Venice ruled itself, by refusing to let anyone matter too much. Importance was shared thinly, authority diluted until it became manageable. The city did not ask its leaders to be great. It asked them to be temporary. As water laps outside and the room's empty, the system remains, unmoved, waiting for the next meeting, the next vote, the next adjustment. Power rests not in a throne, but in the absence of one. This was the quiet network. Not inspiring, not heroic, just persistent. And persistence was the language Venice spoke best. After the quiet network settled into place, the city discovered something unexpected. Nothing dramatic happened. No turning point announced itself. There was simply less noise, fewer sudden shifts, fewer nights spent wondering who would be in charge by morning. Order arrived the way fog does in the lagoon. Gradually, softly, without asking permission. Venice did not eliminate conflict. It learned how to stretch it until it lost urgency. Disagreements still existed, ambitions still stirred, but they moved slowly enough to be seen coming. The system did not prevent tension. It absorbed it. That difference mattered more than any law. The network of councils and overlapping duties created friction by design. Decisions took time, too much time according to outsiders, but slowness acted like a filter. Impulsive ideas struggled to survive repeated discussion. Reckless plans lost momentum. What remained after delay tended to be practical, or at least manageable. This pace frustrated people who wanted decisive action. Venice accepted their frustration as a cost. Speed solves immediate problems. Slowness prevents future ones. The city chose prevention. It was not heroic. It was patient. Coups require concentration of power. Concentration requires gaps. The Venetian system was almost nothing but gaps filled with procedure. Power passed through so many hands that seizing it became exhausting. By the time an ambitious figure reached the center, they were already surrounded by committees politely asking for clarification. There is a quiet humor in imagining a would-be usurper defeated, not by guards but by paperwork, forms to complete, meetings to attend, approvals to obtain, momentum evaporating while minutes were recorded. The system did not shout no, it asked for more detail until enthusiasm gave up. This did not mean the city never faced danger. It meant danger arrived slowly enough to be prepared for. When pressure built, it was distributed across institutions rather than focused on a single leader. Responsibility spread, blame diluted, survival improved. The absence of constant upheaval allowed memory to accumulate. Institutions remembered what individuals could not. Past mistakes informed present caution. The city did not need to relearn the same lessons every generation. Records held them quietly. This continuity created stability that felt almost unnatural in a restless world. Elsewhere, power changed hands violently, streets filled, blood reset hierarchies. Venice watched from the water and adjusted tariffs. It was not indifferent. It was insulated. People noticed. Merchants preferred predictable ports. Traders valued cities where contracts survived leaders. Stability attracted movement. Movement brought wealth. Wealth reinforced the system that produced stability. The loop closed without ceremony. Late at night, this order feels especially present. Empty chambers, chairs pushed in, documents resting. The machinery of governance paused but not dismantled. Tomorrow it resumes. Always tomorrow. This expectation calms nerves. Uncertainty loses its edge when routine holds. The system also shaped temperament. Citizens learned that shouting accomplished little. Influence came through persistence, through attendance, through mastering procedure. Passion cooled into strategy. Not everyone liked this. Those who thrived elsewhere often left. Those who stayed adapted. Ironically, this calm discouraged rebellion more effectively than fear ever could. When life continues without disruption, rebellion feels unnecessary. Why risk chaos when tomorrow looks acceptable? Stability breeds loyalty quietly. The city paid a price for this calm. Innovation slowed, decisions lagged, opportunities were sometimes missed. Venice accepted that trade. Missing an opportunity is survivable. Civil collapse is not. The Lagoon taught caution early. The system reflected that lesson. Foreign observers often misunderstood this order. They mistook calm for weakness, slowness for decay. They expected dramatic collapse that never came. Instead, they found resistance through endurance. The city did not confront storms. It waited them out. This approach shaped foreign policy as well. Provocation was met with delay. Delay confused aggressors. By the time responses arrived, circumstances had shifted. Time itself became a tool. Venice wielded it without drawing attention. The quiet network ensured that no single failure defined the city. Leaders came and went. Policies shifted incrementally. Nothing overturned everything at once. The absence of sharp turns preserved balance. Late-night history favors these moments. The unrecorded nights where nothing happened. Those nights are the foundation of survival. Venice accumulated them patiently. The slow order also created trust between generations. Parents knew their children would inherit institutions rather than chaos. Planning extended beyond lifetimes. Buildings rose slowly. Families invested carefully. The future felt negotiable rather than threatening. This did not make the city kind. It made it stable. Stability is not gentle, it is firm. It resists change quietly until change proves it belongs. Many forces failed that test. The lack of frequent coups meant violence became rare enough to feel abnormal. When conflict did occur, it shocked rather than thrilled. Shock discouraged repetition. Calm returned quickly. Venice learned that drama exhausts societies. Quiet replenishes them. The city chose replenishment again and again. As night deepens, the water reflects lights that do not flicker urgently. The city breathes evenly. Order holds not because it is imposed, but because it is expected. This expectation was the real achievement, not laws, not councils. The belief that tomorrow would resemble today closely enough to plan, that belief is fragile elsewhere. In Venice, it endured. Slow order does not attract storytellers. It bores them, but it outlasts them. Venice understood that longevity requires patience more than brilliance. The quiet network created the conditions. Slow order filled them. Together they formed a city that resisted collapse by refusing excitement. History remembers revolutions. Venice remembered continuity. That memory carried it through centuries when louder places burned themselves out. The lagoon still mirrors this lesson. Water moves slowly when it can. It does not rush without reason. Venice learned to match that rhythm. Calm systems outlast loud moments, not because they are stronger, but because they waste less energy proving it. By the time order slowed and systems learned to breathe, the city discovered that nothing truly stayed still. Calm did not mean rest. Stability did not mean silence. Beneath the steady surface, something moved constantly. Offers passed hand to hand. Prices shifted with weather and rumor. Conversations carried weight, even when spoken softly. Venice did not sleep when it stopped shouting. It traded. The city learned early that everything had a value even if it pretended otherwise. Wood had a price, time had a price, silence had a price. Even refusal carried cost. This was not greed. It was awareness. The lagoon demanded attention to consequence. Ignore cost, and water reminded you. Ignore timing, and tides corrected you. Life trained the people to measure without moral commentary. Negotiation did not arrive as strategy. It arrived as survival. When resources are limited, force wastes them. Discussion preserves them. The city had little room for waste. Space was precious. Access was fragile. The ability to speak and listen became as useful as the ability to row, perhaps more. Trade shaped temperament. Voices stayed even, words were chosen carefully. Overstatement felt risky, understatement felt wise. When every exchange could affect tomorrow, caution became a habit. People learned to pause, to wait for the other side to speak. Silence became a tool rather than a void. Venice did not believe in fixed positions. Positions hardened too quickly, they cracked under pressure. The lagoon taught flexibility. Water does not argue, it adjusts. The city followed that example. Agreements were provisional, prices were temporary, loyalty was situational. This was not betrayal. It was adaptation refined into culture. Markets reflected this instinct. No stall assumed permanence. Goods arrived and left. Vendors watched faces more than items. Information traveled faster than objects. A raised eyebrow signaled demand. A pause suggested leverage. Commerce felt less like transaction and more like conversation that never ended. There is gentle humor in how uncomfortable this made outsiders. Visitors arrived expecting declarations, they found questions, they expected certainty, they received options. Negotiation felt evasive to those raised on commands. Venice did not explain itself. It waited. Everything truly did have a price, but not always in coin. Time paid interest, delay created advantage. Patience was currency. Reputation too, but only in measurable ways. A merchant known for flexibility earned trust. One known for stubbornness earned solitude. The city negotiated with everyone, including itself. Councils debated tariffs. Merchants bargained with officials. Families argued over routes. Nothing moved without conversation. This slowed things, but it also prevented shock. Sudden decisions feel powerful. Gradual ones feel survivable. Negotiation also softened conflict. Disputes rarely exploded. They stretched, stretching diffused heat. By the time agreement arrived, passion had cooled into practicality. The city preferred cooled decisions. They lasted longer. Late at night, the instinct becomes visible. Docks quiet but not empty. Conversations linger. A deal postponed rather than refused. The city breathes through its bargains. Silence holds potential rather than absence. This habit of trading everything also reshaped morality. Right and wrong mattered less than workable and unworkable. This unsettled some observers. Venice accepted the discomfort. The lagoon never offered certainty. It offered continuity. Negotiation protected that continuity. Even war followed this logic. Conflicts opened with calculation. Alliances formed with clauses. Battles were weighed against expense. Victory was valuable only if it paid back its cost. The city treated war as an extension of trade rather than its opposite. Outsiders found this unsettling. Venice found it sensible. Children absorbed this instinct early. They watched adults talk their way through obstacles. They learned that no answer was final, that no refusal closed all doors. Words became tools. Tone mattered. Listening mattered more. There is irony in how this constant bargaining created trust. Not emotional trust, but procedural trust. Everyone knew the rules would be discussed, that no one would be surprised by final terms. Predictability emerged from flexibility, a rare combination. Negotiation also prevented stagnation. Prices adjusted, routes changed, opportunities shifted. The city remained alert. Comfort never settled long enough to become complacency. Trade kept minds moving even when bodies rested. The lagoon itself felt like a negotiator. Tides rose and fell, channels opened and closed. The city responded rather than resisted. Buildings adjusted, schedules shifted. Negotiation with nature never ended. The habit transferred easily to people. Late-night history finds comfort here, a place where power speaks quietly and value is understood rather than proclaimed. A city that never stops trading even when it appears calm. Even when nothing seems to happen, something is always being weighed. Venice did not build monuments to negotiation. It built routines. It trusted conversation more than certainty. That trust carried it through centuries when rigid places shattered under their own confidence. Everything had a price because nothing was guaranteed. That knowledge did not make the city cruel. It made it careful. Carefulness lasted. As water laps against stone and voices fade, the city continues its oldest practice: measuring, adjusting, offering, waiting. Negotiation remains instinct, not policy, a quiet habit formed under pressure and never abandoned. This was the city always trading, not restless, not greedy, just attentive. And attention turned out to be the most valuable currency of all. The city did not advertise itself as honest. That would have sounded suspicious. Instead, it became known as effective. Things arrived when promised. Ships departed on time. Payments cleared. Contracts were enforced, not by virtue but by memory. Reputation formed quietly through repetition. Reliability replaced righteousness. After a while, people stopped asking whether Venice was trustworthy. They asked whether Venice worked. That question mattered more. In a world where most systems failed unpredictably, a system that functioned consistently felt almost moral by comparison. The city understood this and leaned into it without ceremony. Efficiency became identity, not speed for its own sake, but reduced friction, less wasted motion, fewer surprises, clear procedures even if the outcomes felt cold. Venice learned that predictability calms markets more effectively than goodwill. You could dislike the terms and still rely on their execution. This had a side effect. Trust slowly became unnecessary, not absent, unnecessary. The system carried weight without requiring belief. You did not need to like your counterpart. You only needed to know the process would outlast both of you. There is something faintly humorous about this. Other cities bragged about honor and loyalty while changing rules mid-conversation. Venice shrugged and enforced contracts with quiet consistency. Outsiders complained about Venetian coldness while continuing to trade with them anyway. Ideals offended. Logistics convinced. The city trained its people accordingly. Emotion stayed out of negotiation, not because it was banned, but because it slowed things down. Expressiveness felt inefficient. Calm saved time. When everyone assumed no one was acting out of generosity, clarity improved. Late at night, you can almost feel this mentality lingering. Offices dark, but ledgers orderly. Warehouses silent, but inventory precise. The city rests without forgetting its structure. Order does not sleep, it waits. Trust as a concept did not disappear, it simply narrowed. You trusted the mechanism, not the person. You trusted schedules, not smiles. This reduced disappointment. People failed, systems endured. Some found this unsettling, they wanted warmth. Venice offered predictability. In trade, predictability wins. Warmth fades under pressure. Procedures remain. Reputation grew outward through results. Merchants spoke of Venice not as fair, but as dependable. Fairness requires agreement. Dependability requires repetition. The latter scales better. The city chose scalability. There is irony here. By removing the expectation of trust, Venice created a form of safety. Betrayal requires belief. Without belief, there is only breach of procedure, which can be corrected. Emotional injury gives way to logistical inconvenience. Efficiency also limited spectacle. Deals happened quietly. Disputes resolved without drama. Drama costs time and time costs money. The city preferred muted resolution. Outsiders mistook this for indifference. It was focus. Even conflict followed rules. Penalties known, consequences enforced. Nothing personal. This phrase appears often in places that are deeply personal. In Venice, it was accurate. Business stayed business because survival depended on it. The Lagoon encouraged this outlook. Water does not care about intentions, only timing, only weight, only movement. The city mirrored its environment. Romantic narratives drowned quickly here. Practical ones floated. Children absorbed this early. They watched adults treat agreements as tools rather than promises. They learned that consistency mattered more than charm, that finishing tasks built reputation faster than declaring values. There is mild, dark humor in how this confused moral observers. Critics accused Venice of lacking soul while using Venetian ships to move their goods. Accusations arrived on schedules maintained by the very system being criticized. Late-night history appreciates this contradiction. A city accused of coldness that kept others warm through trade. A place where trust was optional but delivery was not. Efficiency protected the city from internal collapse. Fewer factions formed around ideals. Procedures limited ambition. Power circulated through systems rather than personalities. No one became irreplaceable. That reduced instability. Trust as luxury did not vanish entirely. It moved inward. Private circles, family, long partnerships. Outside those boundaries, efficiency ruled. This separation kept expectations realistic. The city never claimed to be virtuous. It claimed to be operational. That honesty prevented disillusionment. When something failed, it was fixed rather than moralized. At night, this feels almost peaceful. No declarations echoing through stone halls, just records, just schedules, just the quiet confidence of systems that know what they will do tomorrow. This approach did not make Venice kind. It made it durable. Kindness flickers. Durability persists. Efficiency became reputation because reputation built on values can fracture. Reputation built on results compounds. Venice understood compounding long before mathematics formalized it. The city that always traded learned another lesson quietly. When trust becomes optional, people stop pretending. Clarity replaces performance. Negotiation becomes cleaner. Outcomes improve. As water laps and ledgers close, the city settles into its familiar rhythm. Calm not because nothing is wrong, but because everything is accounted for. This is the comfort of systems that expect no one to be perfect. Efficiency was not an ideal, it was a response, and response turned into identity. The city moved forward not asking to be believed, only asking to be tested. Prosperity rarely announces itself with poetry. It arrives quietly through full warehouses and balanced ledgers. Only later does it decorate walls. Venice learned this order early. Money came first. Culture followed like an afterthought that refused to stay small. Art in the city was never born starving. It grew in rooms that smelled of oil pigment and warm bread. Painters worked within reach of docks. Glassmakers listened to waves while shaping fire. Printers measured time in pages rather than prayers. Culture here did not float above commerce. It rested on it like stone on timber. The city did not ask what art meant before funding it. It asked what it cost. That question simplified everything. Once cost was known, patronage became manageable. Workshops multiplied not because of inspiration, but because demand allowed repetition. Repetition builds skill faster than passion ever could. Late-night history appreciates this honesty, a place where beauty was not mysterious. It was scheduled, materials ordered, deadlines set. Art became reliable without becoming dull. Studios functioned like businesses. Apprentices learned efficiency before style. Mistakes wasted materials, and materials were expensive. This encouraged focus. Fewer dramatic gestures, more controlled mastery. The result felt effortless, though effort was constant. Glass furnaces burned steadily, not for spectacle, but for output. Consistency mattered. Clients expected clarity, color purity, shapes that survived travel. Fragility was tolerated only within limits. Even beauty had to endure handling. Printing followed similar logic. Pages stacked. Type reused. Errors corrected quietly. Ideas moved because infrastructure allowed them to move. Knowledge traveled as cargo, bound and shipped. Culture scaled because commerce understood scaling. There is light irony here. Outsiders praised Venetian creativity while ignoring the invoices that made it possible. Inspiration received applause. Accounting received silence. Both were essential. Only one was romantic. The city embraced this imbalance with mild amusement. Let others praise genius. Venice counted shipments. Artists benefited from this arrangement. Stability freed them from constant survival. Focus improved work. Patronage reduced desperation. Patrons expected results, not vague brilliance, finished pieces, deliverables. This expectation shaped style. Artists learned to complete rather than endlessly revise. Perfection yields to completion when deadlines exist. Late-at-night workshops quiet but not empty. Tools rest, orders wait. Tomorrow work resumes. Culture does not need drama to continue. It needs continuity. Even innovation followed trade routes. New techniques spread alongside goods. Ideas piggybacked on commerce. A printer adopted a method because it saved time. A painter adopted a pigment because it lasted longer. Practical improvements disguised as aesthetic evolution. This environment produced abundance, not evenly distributed, but enough to sustain multiple crafts. Competition sharpened quality. If one workshop lagged, another replaced it. Reputation depended on consistency. Cultural identity emerged accidentally. No manifesto declared artistic supremacy. Output accumulated, visitors noticed, they told stories. The city shrugged and continued working. There is humor in how little the city worried about meaning. Meaning arrived anyway. It always does when production persists long enough. Art served power indirectly. Beautiful objects impressed partners, displayed success, signaled stability. Culture became soft infrastructure, persuasion without argument. The lagoon again provided a lesson. Water carries whatever floats. Culture floated because commerce kept it buoyant. Remove trade and beauty sinks quickly. Children grew up surrounded by craftsmanship. It felt normal. Excellence appeared ordinary. This normalized skill raised expectations. Mediocrity stood out. Late-night reflection finds comfort here. A city where beauty was not fragile, where culture had funding plans, where creativity survived because it paid rent. Critics later romanticized suffering as necessary for art. Venice offered a counterexample. Stability breeds mastery. Hunger sharpens desperation, not skill. This does not mean artists lived luxuriously. Work remained demanding. Repetition wears hands, fire burns, ink stains, but survival was predictable. Predictability supports long attention spans. The city never pretended culture was sacred. It treated it as valuable. Those are different categories. Sacred things resist pricing. Valuable things get protected. Venice protected its culture by integrating it into commerce. This ensured longevity. Styles evolved, workshops closed, others opened. The system continued. Late at night, as water laps stone walls, culture rests without fear. Tomorrow there will be orders. Tomorrow there will be work. Beauty will continue not because it must, but because it can. Culture on credit sounds cynical. It is also practical. Credit extends time. Time allows refinement. Refinement creates beauty. The city did not worship art. It employed it. And employment kept it alive. In the end, culture here did not shout its importance. It accumulated quietly, layer by layer, invoice by invoice, until history noticed and called it inevitable. Venice never argued that beauty mattered. It simply paid for it. After beauty learned to invoice, something quieter followed behind it. Ideas noticed the open doors. They watched goods move effortlessly from dock to dock and realized they could travel the same way, not as whispers, not as secrets, as cargo. Venice did not invent the idea that knowledge could be moved. It perfected the logistics. Once printers began to work at scale, pages stopped being rare objects. They became units, stackable, countable, shippable. Thought acquired weight. Literally, The city treated ideas with the same calm efficiency it gave to pepper and glass. There was no ceremony, no reverence, just production. A text was set, ink applied, pages dried, copies bound, orders filled. Knowledge left the city on boats that smelled faintly of paper and salt. This process stripped ideas of fragility. Once an idea could be replaced, it stopped feeling sacred. Once it could be copied, it stopped depending on memory. This unsettled some observers. Venice found it convenient. Late-night history finds quiet humor here. People feared that spreading ideas would weaken them. Venice spread them anyway and discovered that ideas multiplied faster than control could track. Control was never the goal. Circulation was. Printers became merchants of thought. They evaluated texts not by wisdom, but by demand. What sold stayed in circulation. What did not faded quietly. This sounds brutal. It was also honest. Survival in the market filtered ideas without argument. Knowledge became exportable. Venice shipped perspectives alongside goods. Concepts crossed borders tucked between pages. Cities received them without realizing where they came from. Thought arrived disguised as product. The city did not worry about ownership of ideas. It worried about distribution rights. Who printed, who sold, who shipped. Authority shifted from origin to infrastructure. Those who controlled movement controlled influence. There is a mild irony here. Philosophers elsewhere argued about truth, while Venice delivered options. Readers decided what mattered. Choice replaced instruction. Education changed accordingly. Learning no longer required proximity to centers of authority. Books traveled faster than teachers. A student in a distant town could encounter arguments born far away. This destabilized old hierarchies without direct confrontation. Late at night presses rest, but ideas remain in motion. Warehouses hold stacks waiting for ships. Knowledge pauses but does not stop. Tomorrow routes reopen. Venice did not frame this as revolution. It framed it as opportunity. Demand existed, supply responded. Ideas found markets. Critics warned that commodifying thought would cheapen it. Venice listened politely and continued printing. Cheap ideas travel further. This proved useful. The city exported not conclusions but possibilities. Readers interpreted freely. Misinterpretation spread alongside insight. Venice accepted both as cost of scale. This trade altered how people valued knowledge. Ownership shifted from memorization to access. Having a book mattered more than remembering its contents. Storage replaced recall. This changed thinking habits quietly. There is gentle darkness in this shift. When ideas become abundant, attention becomes scarce. Venice did not solve this problem. It benefited from it. More output required more distribution. Distribution required more infrastructure. The cycle fed itself. Ideas learned to compete. Titles mattered. Presentation mattered. Accessibility mattered. Dense thought simplified. Complex arguments gained structure. This was not intellectual decline. It was adaptation. Late-night history appreciates how little drama accompanied this transformation. No declarations, no manifestos, just presses running and ships departing. The lagoon again offered metaphor. Water carries everything equally. Profound and trivial drift, side by side. Venice let readers decide what to keep. Knowledge exports also softened borders. People argued less about origin when texts felt familiar. Shared references created subtle connection. Venice connected minds without introducing itself. This created influence without visibility. Many encountered Venetian printed ideas without ever seeing the city. Power exercised quietly. There is humor in how merchants of goods complained about unstable markets while merchants of ideas thrived. Thought adapts faster than cargo. Demand shifts quickly. Print responds. The city became known not just for products but for perspectives, a place where information passed through, a clearinghouse of thought. Late-night calm settles here, a world where ideas move silently across water. No speeches, just pages turning in distant rooms. Knowledge as commodity sounds cynical. It also democratized access. Price lowered barriers. Books reached hands previously empty. Venice did not care who read as long as copies sold. That indifference expanded readership more effectively than idealism ever could. The city exported ideas without claiming them. This prevented backlash. Influence without attribution invites less resistance. As presses continued, the city adjusted. Formats shrank, texts simplified, distribution widened, knowledge learned to travel light. Late at night, history lingers on this moment, when thought stopped waiting for invitation, when it boarded ships unannounced. Venice did not ask whether ideas should travel. It asked whether they could. Once answered, the rest followed naturally. Culture had learned to invoice. Now thought learned to ship. The city never paused to admire this achievement. It simply added another line to the ledger and moved on. The city did not collapse in a single night. Nothing dramatic cracked the water or split the stone. What happened instead was quieter, a long thinning, a gradual wearing away that felt almost polite while it worked. Wars arrived without novelty. At first, they resembled earlier conflicts, familiar routes, familiar rivals, familiar calculations. Ships sailed, ledgers adjusted, losses counted, recoveries planned. Venice had done this before and believed it would do it again. But something had shifted. The opponents were no longer limited to predictable circles. New powers pressed from directions that did not respect old rhythms. Trade lanes stretched farther. Protection costs rose. The lagoon that once insulated now required constant attention. Pressure became routine. Not crisis pressure, but background strain. The kind that does not alarm yet never leaves. Fleets needed maintenance, crews demanded pay, fortifications aged faster than expected. None of this was catastrophic. All of it was exhausting. Late-night history favors this kind of decay, the kind that happens while everyone insists things are fine, the kind that survives reports and optimism. Wars stopped producing clear benefits. Victories cost more than they returned. Defeats required repairs that took years. Even successful campaigns left the city thinner than before. The balance sheet still worked, but margins narrowed. There is mild irony in how accustomed Venice was to adaptation. It adjusted so well that warning signs felt ordinary. A lost route here, a delayed shipment there. These were solved individually. The pattern remained unnoticed. Opponents changed tactics. They learned patience. They did not need to conquer the city. They only needed to compete longer than it could comfortably endure. Time became weaponized. The city responded with competence. Shipyards worked, diplomats negotiated, taxes rose carefully, systems held. This is what made erosion difficult to detect. Nothing broke. Everything wore. Late at night, docks remained busy. Lanterns reflected on water. Movement suggested vitality. But motion alone does not equal growth. Sometimes it simply indicates effort spent maintaining position. The wars drained attention as much as resources. Decision makers focused on holding rather than expanding. Innovation slowed. Risk tolerance dropped. The city became careful where it once had been confident. This caution was sensible. It was also limiting. Opportunities passed while committees deliberated. Rivals moved faster because they needed less agreement. Venice valued consensus. Consensus takes time. There is quiet humor in how the city still appeared formidable. Outsiders saw ships and stone and assumed strength. Inside accounting told a different story. Power remained, but it cost more to display. The lagoon felt heavier. Maintenance increased. Channels silted. Structures required reinforcement. War diverted labor from upkeep. Small neglect accumulated. Venice fought not from desperation but from obligation. Commitments required defense. Abandonment signaled weakness. Weakness invited pressure. The cycle tightened. Late-night reflection notes how exhaustion rarely announces itself. It whispers through routines. Meetings grow longer. Decisions feel heavier. Optimism becomes procedural rather than emotional. The city still won battles, that was part of the problem. Winning delayed recognition. Losses forced change. Wins encourage continuation. Venice continued. Rivals learned to bleed it slowly. They targeted routes. They disrupted schedules. They forced responses rather than confronting directly. Each response cost time and resources. The city adapted as it always had. That adaptation consumed what it protected. Flexibility became strain. There is something unsettling about systems that work too well. They absorb damage quietly. They distribute stress evenly until there is nothing left to distribute. Late-night history sits with this moment, when strength becomes maintenance, when effort preserves appearance more than future. Venice did not fail strategically. It succeeded operationally for too long. Success masked depletion. The wars did not destroy the city, they narrowed its options. Each conflict reduced freedom of movement. Each defense hardened habits. Eventually, habit replaced ambition. The city still traded, still built, still negotiated, but it no longer surprised itself. Pressure settled into normalcy. Normalcy numbed urgency. By the time decline felt visible, it had already passed the point of easy correction. At night, the water looked the same. Stone reflected moonlight. Bells marked hours. The city breathed evenly. Only the ledgers noticed the difference. The slow erosion did not announce an ending. It prepared one. History rarely ends loudly. More often it wears thin. Venice remained standing. But standing still is not the same as advancing. This was the age when victory stopped feeling like progress. After victory lost its sense of direction, the city entered a quieter phase. One that did not celebrate, one that did not expand. It simply held. This was not surrender, it was adjustment. Venice learned to treat survival as achievement. A strange shift for a place built on motion. The question was no longer how far can we go, but how much can we keep without breaking ourselves in the process. Every defense carried a cost, not dramatic, not immediate, small drains, ships repaired instead of replaced, crews rotated instead of expanded, fortifications patched rather than redesigned, each choice sensible, each choice narrowing future flexibility. Late-night history lingers here because this is where most powers actually live, not in glory, not in collapse, but in maintenance. Holding territory required constant attention. Garrisons needed supplies, routes needed protection, officials needed reassurance. Nothing stayed quiet for long. Even peace demanded vigilance. Peace became labor. The irony was sharp but subtle. Venice had mastered systems that resisted chaos. Those same systems resisted change. They absorbed shock so well that no single moment demanded transformation. The city became excellent at not falling apart. That excellence consumed its energy. Enemies noticed. They adjusted. Pressure arrived not as overwhelming force, but as persistence. Block a route, delay a shipment, force negotiation. The goal was not conquest, the goal was fatigue. Each time Venice responded, it succeeded. The line held. That success reinforced the strategy of holding rather than reimagining. Why change what still works? The question went unasked long enough to matter. The city now fought defensively, even when attacking. Campaigns aimed to restore balance rather than create advantage. Success meant returning to the previous state, not surpassing it. This is how progress quietly stalls. Late at night, the docks still moved. Activity masked intention. Movement felt reassuring. Yet motion without momentum circles back on itself. Decision-makers grew cautious, not fearful, responsible. Responsibility tends to narrow vision. It prioritizes stability. It avoids risk. Venice became very responsible. Holding also altered psychology. Pride shifted from ambition to endurance. Stories celebrated resilience rather than daring. This changed how people imagined the future. Less as opportunity, more as obligation. The lagoon offered a familiar lesson. Water held back requires constant reinforcement. Walls must be watched, gates maintained. Ignore one section and the rest follows. Venice understood this too well. Defense demanded coordination. Coordination required consensus. Consensus required time. Time was increasingly scarce. Rivals with simpler structures moved faster. Venice moved carefully. There is gentle, dark humor in how professionalism replaced inspiration. The city functioned like an experienced worker nearing retirement. Competent, reliable, less interested in new projects. Late-night history finds this phase unsettling because it feels reasonable. No mistakes, no dramatic failures, just a series of correct decisions that collectively reduced possibility. Holding the line became identity. The line itself grew heavier with each defense. Eventually, the city carried its own past like armor that no longer fit. Every victory restored the status quo. The status quo demanded another defense. The cycle tightened. Venice still negotiated brilliantly, still calculated costs, still managed complexity. What it struggled to do was imagine expansion without destabilization. Growth felt dangerous. Stability felt virtuous. Rivals did not need to defeat the city. They needed to wait. Time worked on their behalf. Late at night, when councils ended and rooms emptied, the city rested in familiar patterns. Comfort settled where curiosity once lived. This is not decay, it is drift. Survival, as objective, reshapes behavior. It favors caution over creativity, preservation over exploration. Venice preserved itself impressively. That achievement came with a hidden price. The city remained powerful enough to matter. That mattered less than it once had. History often frames decline as loss. Here it was narrowing, a funnel of choices growing smaller with each successful defense. Venice did not notice the moment holding became habit. Habits feel safe until they become walls. The line held night after night, year after year, and slowly the question changed without anyone announcing it. Not what can we become, but how long can we remain The city did not fall. That is the detail history often gets wrong because collapse is easier to narrate than endurance. Venice did not break apart. It narrowed. It became smaller, without admitting it was shrinking. At first, nothing appeared different. The water still reflected stone, boats still traced familiar paths, palaces still caught the light with practiced elegance. Order remained intact. Beauty remained intact. That was the trick. Decline wore a familiar face. Venice had always understood structure. It had built systems to outlast individuals and routines to survive disruption. Those systems continued to function. Meetings were held, records kept, schedules followed. From the inside, everything still felt impressively organized. The difference lay not in failure, but in position. The city was no longer where movement converged. Trade routes shifted gradually like water finding easier channels. Influence followed momentum elsewhere. Venice remained involved, but no longer essential. This was not obvious to those living within its walls. Daily life continued. Merchants bargained, officials deliberated, workers labored, art still appeared. The city performed itself convincingly. Late-night history finds this moment unsettling because it looks stable. Stability can mask retreat better than chaos ever could. The world around Venice expanded. New routes opened beyond its reach. New centers accumulated energy. Venice did not lose relevance overnight. It lost inevitability. Once events no longer required passing through the lagoon, the city became optional. Optional is dangerous for powers built on necessity. Venice responded with competence. It adapted trade practices. It refined diplomacy. It negotiated access. It maintained alliances. All of this worked well enough to preserve comfort. Comfort delayed recognition. The city was still wealthy, still cultured, still admired. Visitors praised its order and beauty. Outsiders mistook preservation for dominance. Venice did not correct them. Inside, however, calculations shifted. Decisions favored conservation. Risk felt unjustifiable. Expansion appeared reckless. This mindset felt prudent. It was also limiting. Venice had once thrived by placing itself at intersections. Now intersections moved. The city stood firm while the world rearranged itself around it. Late at night, this change is almost audible, not through sound, but through absence. Fewer urgent messages, fewer pivotal decisions, more routine management. The city still mattered, just not urgently. There is gentle irony in how well Venice handled irrelevance. Many powers panic when they lose centrality. Venice remained composed. It did not lash out. It did not overextend. It accepted reduction without drama. Acceptance, however, is not the same as renewal. The city invested in appearance. Palaces were maintained. Ceremonies continued. Rituals reassured identity. These acts were not empty. They preserved coherence. They also froze posture. History often celebrates adaptability. Venice adapted brilliantly. It adapted itself into sustainability rather than growth. The lagoon itself offered metaphor, a shallow basin protected but constrained. Expansion requires depth. Venice chose safety over depth long before the choice felt consequential. Late-night history lingers on the elegance of this retreat. No burning, no shouting, just gradual repositioning. Influence became softer. Decisions mattered locally rather than globally. Venice remained a reference point rather than a command center. People visited to admire rather than to negotiate fate. This shift did not feel like loss to those living through it. Life improved in some ways. Less strain, fewer emergencies, more predictability. Peace has its comforts. The city did not disappear. It refined itself inward. It focused on quality over reach, depth over breadth. That choice preserved identity at the cost of relevance. There is mild humor in how outsiders continued to speak of Venice as if it still directed events. Reputation lingers longer than reality. Venice allowed the confusion. It cost nothing. Internally, the city became expert at managing decline gracefully. Budgets balanced, systems adjusted, expectations recalibrated. It was impressive. Late-night history does not condemn this. It observes it. There is dignity in controlled reduction. Many powers fail this stage catastrophically. Venice succeeded at shrinking without shattering. That success carried its own melancholy. The city still produced beauty. It still inspired art. It still maintained order. None of these required centrality. They required continuity. As centuries passed, the world grew louder, faster, more chaotic. Venice remained quiet, slow, measured. These qualities once signaled authority. Now they signaled retreat. Visitors described Venice as timeless. Timelessness can be compliment or diagnosis. The city no longer shaped the future. It curated its past. This too requires skill. Late at night, water laps against stone that has seen ambition come and go. Venice stands not as ruin but as artifact still in use. This is perhaps the most unsettling form of decline. Not destruction, not decay, but irrelevance. Achieved without suffering, the city did not notice the exact moment it stopped being central. Such moments rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly while attention is elsewhere. Venice remained beautiful because beauty was never the issue. Power had been. By the time history recognized the shift, Venice had already adjusted its posture. It no longer reached outward, it held inward. The world moved on. Venice stayed. Not fallen, not broken, simply no longer necessary. Quiet diminishment rarely earns dramatic chapters, yet it is how many great things end. Not with noise, but with narrowing. Late-night history prefers this truth. It whispers rather than declares. Venice did not vanish. It receded. And in that recession, it preserved itself so well that the loss almost went unnoticed. Almost. The city does not close its eyes. It simply rests them. Water still presses gently against stone. The same wooden stakes hold the same weight they always have. Boats drift rather than hurry. Voices soften. Nothing announces an ending because nothing has truly ended. Venice continues. That is the strange part. There is no final victory carved into marble, no catastrophe dramatic enough to justify forgetting. The city does not demand remembrance through tragedy. It remains through habit. Once it mattered because everything passed through it. Now it matters because it remains while everything else passes by. Late-night history prefers places like this, not loud enough to impress, not broken enough to pity, just present. The city sleeps the way an old thinker pauses mid-sentence, not finished, not continuing, simply holding the thought. People still walk the same narrow paths, still cross the same bridges, still complain about the same damp air and stubborn stone. Life goes on without needing to prove anything. There is gentle irony here. A place built on movement survives by standing still. A city born from urgency ends in patience. No one rings a bell to mark the moment importance fades. Importance slips away when attention turns elsewhere. Venice does not chase it. The wooden stakes remain unseen beneath the water. That feels appropriate. Foundations rarely ask for credit. They exist so something else can stand. At night, the city looks the same as it did centuries ago. That resemblance comforts visitors. It also hides the truth. Venice is not a symbol of loss. It is a symbol of after. After ambition, after necessity, after the world moved on, and still it breathes, still it holds, still it sleeps on wood, driven into mud by people who never planned to be remembered. History often ends with noise. This one ends with water touching stone and nothing else required. The city does not ask to matter again. It simply remains. And sometimes that is the most unsettling ending of all.